What changes are Morgan Stanley and its team making here?
It's a pretty straightforward one, Brian. All across Wall Street, we have these wirehouses, whether they're Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, B of A's Merrill, or UBS. And they cater to people who are at least in the sort of single-digit million-dollar asset class, AUM class. And for the most part, these are people who are increasingly getting intrigued in Bitcoin. They look at the charts, as we've talked about on your shows before, and they're intrigued and they want exposure, and they want to do it through the safety of these wealth management platforms that are obviously well-regulated, well-controlled. And Morgan Stanley, being one of the biggest, if not the biggest, with $4 trillion in assets, has finally said, look, we are not going to decide whether or not this is necessarily a good or bad thing. We acknowledge that clients want this, and we're going to expedite this and allow this. We're going to allow them to do it through 3 third-party funds, 2 of them through Galaxy, obviously, and these are Mike Novogratz's firm, and another through another firm. And we're going to allow people to actually hold close to a direct ownership in Bitcoin, which is a new thing, for the world of Wall Street, for sure.
I assume they would only do that, Hugh, because banks, sometimes have a profit motive. Just throwing that out there. If there was client demand.
The client demand is the motivating factor. They cited that, the sources I spoke to cited that directly. And so, you have people clamoring for it. And, it's not like there aren't other ways to get exposure to Bitcoin. If you got a few $1 million, you could do it directly. You could do it through Coinbase. You could do it through Coinbase Pro. You could do it through other things. And yet, if you are a high net worth individual and you've got all your other assets being held, in trust by Morgan Stanley or another firm, it really is much more clear and simple and succinct if you own it together and it's part of, a percentage of your overall holding. And by the way, Morgan Stanley, they're requiring people, capping people at 2.5%. So they think it's perhaps, an interesting, good idea to have a speculative investment in this, but they want you to do it at a maximum of 2.5%.